Hey everyone, this is our lesson on the chemistry of living cells. And by the end of this lesson, you should be able to identify the properties of water and how atoms interact with each other. Oops. So first, let's talk about the basics of matter. So matter is made up of elements, and elements themselves are made up of atoms that are identical. So these could not be broken down by ordinary chemical means. So an example here is gold. And the reason they can't be broken down is because it's one sample of matter that only contains one type of element. So there's no way to break it down since they're all the same. And you can see a list of elements here in this light up clock that I actually really like. We also have ions, which are charged atoms. So there are unequal numbers of protons and electrons. We're going to talk about these on the next slide, so I'll go into more detail there. And then we also have compounds, and compounds are groups of atoms that are held together by chemical bonds, and they can be separated by chemical means, so in a reaction. And this gray kind of rotating molecule here is an example of a compound. So the dark gray center is one element, and then the lighter circles on the outside are a different element. So now let's discuss the basic structure of atoms. So the first thing that we look at are protons, and these are subatomic particles that have a positive charge. They are found in the nucleus, and these are or represent the atom's identity, so what's called the atomic number. This number is different for every atom, so as you change that number, you change the element that you're looking for or looking at. Next, we have neutrons, which have a neutral charge based on the name. You should know pro means positive, neut means neutral, zero. These are also found in the nucleus, and since they're a neutral charge, they contribute only to the atom's mass. So we have what's called our mass number, or our atomic mass for what you see on the periodic table. And we calculate this by protons and neutrons. So since both of these are found in the nucleus, that means that the nucleus itself has a positive charge. And then we also have electrons. Electrons are negatively charged. This out of the way. These are found rotating outside the nucleus. And if you change the number of electrons, you will turn your atom into an ion. So in a neutral atom, we have equal numbers of protons and electrons because they should cancel out. But if we move electrons, which are the only things we can change in basic chemistry, if we move electrons, then we could have more or less than the number of protons. If we have more protons than electrons, we make a positive ion. If we have more electrons than protons, we make a negative ion because we have more negatives. Some things here to look on the side with these pictures that are very important. This first top picture is a box from the periodic table just to show you where you can find this information, how it's labeled, because this is important for activities and future reference. So you'll have the element symbol somewhere in the middle, which constitutes 1 to 2 letters. Up at the top, you should see the atomic number, and it will be a whole number. You either underneath the element or the number, you'll see the element name written out for you. And on most periodic tables, on the very bottom is this atomic mass, which is calculated in AMUs. So it's a little different than the mass number because, as you know, it's a decimal value here, but we do look at atomic mass. This picture underneath is called a Bohr model. And this is how we can represent atoms. And you might see this in an activity later on as well. So we would have the nucleus in the middle, and we would have circles representing the protons and neutrons there. So you would need to know those numbers. And then around the nucleus in set circles would be electrons. So the first circle closest to the nucleus can only hold 2 electrons, as you can see here. The second circle can hold up to 8 electrons, and then the third can hold up to 18. So you would just add dots for each electron until you filled that capacity on each circle. So it's 2, 8, 18. So now let's talk quickly about chemical bonds. There's one type of bond we're going to really focus on here, and that's hydrogen bonding. And I do kind of hate this name because it's not actually a full bond. It's more of a force between two molecules. So a bond is between atoms within a compound. This is between compounds. So it's more of a force. These will link molecules together, and it is the strongest force that we look at in comparison to other forces. It's weaker than any bond, but it is our strongest intermolecular force. This will only occur between polar molecules, and there has to obviously be a hydrogen present in that molecule. And these are, like I said, weak bonds. These bonds hold water together, which is why it gives it some of the properties that it has. So if you look at this GIF over here, this is a water molecule. The white circles are the hydrogens and the red circles are the oxygens. And the oxygen has a slight negative charge, whereas the hydrogens have a slight positive charge. And that's why we have a positive and a negative attracting to each other here. These bonds will give water a lot of the amazing properties that we have, which we're going to look at now. So now we'll just look over some quick properties of water. So first, we know that water stores heat, which means it heats up really slowly, but it takes longer to cool down. You've seen this if you've ever, heated water up on the stove. The pot gets hot very quickly, but you can stick your hand in the water for a little while before it actually starts getting warm. And then once it reaches a boil, if you cut the heat off, it's going to continue to boil for a while as well before it cools down. You can also see this if you ever get in a pool right after it's filled up in the beginning of the summer. It might be very hot outside, but that water is going to be extremely cold for a couple days. This is really important for marine ecosystems and animals because because it allows animals to live in an aquatic environment without a huge drastic temperature change very quickly. So when the ocean cools off, it's going to take it a while because that's a huge body of water. We also know that water clings to itself, so clings to other water molecules. That's known as cohesion, which you can see here in this GIF, where the water droplet absorbs two other droplets. And it also clings to other surfaces or molecules, and that's known as adhesion. So adhesion is with other things. This is all thanks to hydrogen bonds. This is one way we see that plant leaves get water. So water is absorbed through the roots. It's moved through the xylem, so you can see that here in our bottom GIF, where the water molecules are attracted to each other, but also to the cell walls to move their way up through the plant. And this is also known as capillary action, which is caused by the adhesion of water to surfaces. If you've ever gone to the doctor and got your finger pricked for a blood test and they put that little glass tube on your finger and your blood sucks up into it, that's a capillary tube because that allows for capillary action. Another property of water is that the ice, the solid form, is less dense. And this is because of the hydrogen bonding, and those hydrogen bonds actually leave air pockets as the water freezes or goes into solid state, which makes it float in water. And this is one of the only substances where the solid form is less dense than the liquid form. It ionizes, which means that the covalent bonds in water break very easily. And it's a powerful solvent, so it dissolves stuff very easily. It will dissolve other polar compounds because it is polar. Now let's quickly talk about how acids and bases affect a cell's environment. So first, an acid is defined as a substance that releases H plus ions into solution and has a low pH. So when I say low pH, that means from 1 to 7, well, 1 to 6. Bases are substances that release OH minus ions and have a very high pH, so 8 to 14. pH itself is known as the potency of hydrogen, how much hydrogen's in solution, and it's a measure of acidity or alkalinity of a substance. So if you have a pH of 7, that is a neutral pH, so we're looking at water there. And it ranges from 1 to 14. So the lower side is acids, and the higher side is bases. And the reason we look at this is because we want homeostasis in the cells. So to keep from acids or bases really affecting that environment, cells will secrete buffers, which will cause a resistance in change of pH. So it'll help keep pH the same. We do have indicators to help know if an acid or base is present, and the way it does that is by involving a color change. So a lot of times in the lab, we'll use litmus paper, but litmus paper does the same thing as in this GIF, what litmus solution does. So if your solution that's unknown turns the paper or the liquid red, then it is an acidic solution. If it turns the paper or liquid blue, it is a basic solution. So now you should hopefully have the basics down for the chemistry of our living cells.